How did I start this journey toward apokatastasis? Well, let's talk through it. It's a big word, but it really just has to do with the restoration, reconciliation, and renewal of all things everywhere. And it's a word that happens a number of times in the New Testament, or at least its idea. This word it's got some variants, but let's talk through it. How did I start this journey? Well, the seeds were started many years ago. Okay. I was born in church, raised in the church in South Jersey, and always had something in the back of my mind. This is an interesting quandary, idea. Is this possible? Will God restore all things? I remember talking to my pastor growing up about this. We were riding in his car. And I was like, so what's the deal with hell? I probably didn't phrase it like that. What's the deal with eternal punishment? What about the book of Revelation? And I just remember he was driving and looked at me and kind of winked and said, I wouldn't be surprised if God had an ace up his sleeve. And I just remember thinking, oh, wow, interesting. But we really didn't go any further than that. But the idea was started, like, if God is bigger than even hell, or whatever our conception of damnation might look like, then of course God might have the ability, an ace up his sleeve, as it were. I had a professor in college one day who said this story. He told this story. One day, after guest preaching at a church, a congregant came up to me with a worried and angry look on his face. He inquired, "Excuse me, Pastor, you aren't one of those people that dismisses the idea of hell?" I replied, "Don't worry, friend. I believe every word the Apostle Paul says about hell." And the parishioner apparently said, "Oh, thank goodness," and walked away. Now, perhaps this is less than truthful, but it also showed that most people do not know what the Bible says or does not say, but also that it's possible to be accosted for knowing the Bible better than the average congregant. It's really quite tragic, you know. But that was in a class on the Gospel of John, because John's Gospel actually never mentions hell. So what do we do with that? There's a whole biography of the life of Jesus that doesn't talk about damnation in the way that anywhere close to how we do in common conventions today. There was also a lecture in seminary. I was seated in a room with about 60 other people. Might have been a church history class, I forget. I remember the room though. And I was bored. So I was reading through the book of Romans on my own in the middle of class, and I finally got to that bewildering set of passages in chapters 9, 10, and 11 that culminates in chapter 11, where it says, "For God has bound everyone over to disobedience, that he might have mercy on them all." And I just remember pausing in seminary and looking down and be like, what? Guys, this is in here. I mean, I didn't disrupt the class, but I just remember thinking, this is incredible. What do we do with this? There's passages like this I come across every so often, and I don't know what to do with them. But yet, even in seminary, we didn't talk about them. Why? Again, maybe because it disrupts the conventional understanding. So, hell is not mentioned in the book of Acts, the Gospel of John, or the writings of Paul in any way close to what conventional Western Christianity holds. Why is it that it was left out of the preaching and teaching of the early church in Acts? Why is it that the book of Acts doesn't talk about it the same way that we do in the West? Why is it that the Gospel of John, with its high Christology, does not speak of it? Why is it that Paul the Apostle speaks of the infinite love of God from which we cannot be separated, remember Romans 8, to the exclusion of some comment of eternal punishment or estrangement from God? You start looking at these passages and you start to pull them together, and it causes your mind to swirl with some extra questions, you know? So, for me, deep down, there was always the question or doubt that if God truly was unconditional and infinite love, then the idea of God denouncing anyone and not restoring them was utterly inconsistent with the image of Jesus I received in Sunday school as a child. There was a massive incongruence between what I saw or heard or was told to not talk about versus these passages and these ideas. So let's be clear, all right? The infernalist deity, the false God who will crush and destroy or punish sinners forever and is happy at their estrangement eternally, doesn't live up to 1 Corinthians 13. 1 Corinthians 13 is a famous love passage that's often read at weddings. But here we go. I took those verses and inverted them. Ready? The impatient, unkind, joyless, boastful, proud, shaming, self-seeking, easily angered false deity who keeps account of wrongs is unfortunately preached from Christian pulpits is no match or comparison for the actual God of love revealed in Jesus. There's a sense in which we need to constantly ask if our concept of God can live up to what the New Testament says is its definition of love. And any articulation of God that is not comforting is ultimately a lie. That's the words of George MacDonald. So how did I start this journey towards Apokatastasis? Well, its seeds were sown along the way, but it was largely because I would catch hints of a possibility of rumors within church history and coming across passages that were not brought up in the 1-year lectionary, 3-year lectionary, and were straight up just avoided in other church circles. These were passages I had to stumble across myself. And fortunately, I had the opportunity to go to seminary, which gave me the skill set to then read these passages in their original language. And I was happily surprised that actually God is ultimately very concerned with the reconciliation, renewal, regeneration, and restoration of all things. So good. Grace and peace.